Have you looked up at the sky lately? If that's the case, you might have seen a little white dot floating slowly in the sky. This little white dot was actually a Chinese spy balloon that floated across western Canada on January 30th, 2023. According to reports, this balloon traveled across the Pacific Ocean from China and first entered American airspace on January 28 near the Aleutian Islands on the tip of Alaska. Subsequently, it briefly entered Canada airspace and returned back to American airspace over Idaho on January 31st and Montana on February 1st. At this time, the news broke after many residents spotted and recorded the little white dot floating over Billings, Montana. At first, there was a lot of speculation regarding what it was after the videos of the balloon went viral on social media.
Slightly overcast. Well, what the heck is that? That's not the sun. And according to my little planet guide, it's not a planet. What the heck is that?
After that, the Pentagon finally confirmed that this was in fact a Chinese spy balloon on February 2nd. Pentagon spokesperson General Patrick Ryder had this to say about the status of the balloon at that time.
So the balloon is currently assessed to be at about 60,000 feet. So again, well above the range of civilian air traffic, or where civilian air traffic would normally fly. Certainly aware that there are cameras, civilian-owned commercial cameras that could spot this balloon. In terms of guidance to folks, again, this is something that NORAD is closely monitoring. We do assess at this time that it does not pose a physical threat, as I mentioned, to people on the ground. So we'll just leave it at that. Jennifer.
However, it took another 2 days for the U.S. Air Force to shoot down the balloon when it passed South Carolina's coast after it floated across a good chunk of the country.
There it goes. There it goes.
Come on.
Come on. There it is. Stop. There it is. Ah.
In Canada, we mostly learned about this news from the US media and the American authorities. In fact, this event only became public knowledge after the balloon was over Montana when the videos of it went viral. Thus, the Canadian government kept Canadians in the dark until foreign entities broke the news, especially regarding the fact that it went over Canada's airspace for about a day. Since then, the American authorities have shot down several UFOs traveling in Canadian and American airspace in collaboration with the Canadian authorities. Is it just me, or am I the only one who has a lot of interrogations about this? We know that the Trudeau government often hides things from Canadians, but still.
What's going on with Canada? Blackface is tracking it? Tell Trudeau it's a trucker. He'll shoot that thing dead out. Our borders are open to the south. Our skies are open to the north. China pumps in poison, slithers in a little virus, makes love to Swalwell. Now they're watching us from the sky? All of a sudden, Big Brother's Chinese?
Why did the government hide information from Canadians yet again? How could the spy balloon go over Canadian territory without being intercepted? Why didn't the Canadian authorities shoot down the balloon when it entered Canada's airspace? Was the Trudeau government aware of the situation? Did China spy on us with that thing? Well, actually, we got some vague answers from the government in the following days. According to the Canadian authorities, the government was tracking it from the get-go with the Americans, The balloon was not dangerous and everything was under control. However, I'm still skeptical about this situation, especially with that guy in charge.
Regarding the spy balloons, my understanding is the Canadian people did not find out about the spy balloon from your government. It was actually from the American news agencies. Their government, the American government, told the American news agencies very transparently. So Canadians actually found out about the spy balloon that was over Canadian sovereignty for several days, not from your government, not from a Canadian news agency, but from an American one. Do you find that acceptable?
First, Ms. Dancho, as you well know, when it comes to the briefings that the government receives from our national security and intelligence community of agencies, that there is a lot of regard to first being careful and cautious around when information is released so that we do not in any way jeopardize either the integrity of the operations which are being undertaken to protect national security, as well as the people who are engaged in those operations. And that is a matter of the utmost sensitivity, as you can appreciate.
Do you find,
but when we
just on that, Minister, do you find then that the American government doesn't have that same commitment to national security as you've said? I mean, they did share, again, they shared the information with their people long before, or before you shared it with us.
I'm glad you added that qualifier, but I would just say, I mean,
So just a non-answer.
we're
Can you commit to this committee that you will be more transparent, or that you'll be the first to deliver the news in the event that this happens again, unlike a few days ago when we had to wait for American news outlets to confirm it?
the government will always share and be transparent when it can without in any way compromising our classified information, the people who work in these agencies, or the integrity of the operations, which are there to protect the national security and the Canadian people.
Did your government have intentions to release this information at any point, or did you just confirm it because the Americans did? Would your government have released this information if the Americans chose not to?
We are always transparent as quickly as we possibly can be, having regard to the sensitivity of the operations that are undertaken to
But you
protect our
can't tell
national
me
security.
if this has happened before. You can't explain why you weren't the first to deliver the news to Canadians, and you can't commit if you're going to tell us if this happens again. That's what we're seeing in this committee today, Minister.
The government will always be transparent as soon as we can be when it
It's
comes to
not
our national
transparency,
security.
Minister, respectfully, that is not transparent. I think it's a definition of not being transparent by not sharing this information with the public. That's the opposite of transparent.
Well, we
Wait a minute. How come we couldn't shoot down a little balloon out of the sky? Really? Our jets can't shoot down a balloon now? Also, there are not too many people living in those regions. So why all the excuses from the government? That said, let's explore other theories that could explain what contributed to the Trudeau government's inaction and secrecy regarding the Chinese spy balloon. Before we go any further, we know that China plays a significant role in the economy since they have been the world's manufacturer for a long time. Therefore, it's clear that it is essential for the Canadian government to keep good relations with China and not anger them, since we depend so much on their products and cheap labor. However, there are more sinister reasons that can explain the Trudeau government's inaction regarding the Chinese spy balloon. Let's explore a few. According to recent data and stats, China's influence on the Canadian economy and politics has grown rapidly since the beginning of the 21st century and even more in recent years. But what can explain that phenomenon? Well, many reasons can explain why this country has been so entangled in Canadian politics. Yet, the fact China has invested a lot in Canada is probably the reason that has the most significance and impact. Since the death of Mao Zedong in 1976, China has been able to open up to the world little by little and move toward a socialist market economy. However, after China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001 with the US endorsement, this nation gained a significant role in the world economy. Since then, they have invested billions and billions everywhere in the world, like in Canada and with the Belt and Road Initiative, just to name a few. According to the China-Canada Investment Tracker of the China Institute at the University of Alberta, Chinese investments in Canada have totaled 93 billion Canadian dollars since 1993, and these investments keep increasing Yet, it is not surprising to see that, since Canada has a strategic position in the world with its abundance of unexploited natural resources, and since the current and past administrations have been very lax regarding Chinese investments in the country. Therefore, China has gained more control and influence in Canada by buying companies and investing in Canadian critical and strategic sectors such as energy, minerals, real estate, telecommunication, and entertainment. Also, let's not forget that the CCP controls all Chinese companies. Plus, multinationals that do business in China must have CCP members on their board. Thus, it is fair to say that everything that is Chinese or has ties with China is CCP.
Also a fact that all Chinese companies, whether they are private or state-owned, they are beholden to the Chinese government. So if the Chinese government wants them to censor, if the Chinese government wants them to survey, they have to do it. They have no choices.
With that being said, here are some stats that show what China has been able to buy in Canada to this day. First, according to Bloomberg, at least 27 public Canadian mining companies have shareholders with ties to China. Chinese firms have also been involved in 89 announced acquisitions and investments in Canadian metals and mining companies in the past decade, totaling around 14 billion Canadian dollars. Recently, the Canadian government has rewritten the rules regarding investments by state-owned companies and entities with links to foreign governments after getting pressure from the public and the opposition. Therefore, the government has forced those firms to diversify their holdings. The Trudeau government has also blocked China from purchasing some gold and lithium mines. For example, in 2020, the Shandong Gold Mining Company could not buy TMAC Resources Inc. in the far northern territory of Nunavut. However, China already has a tight grip on the Canadian mining industry, so the new rules won't do much if the CCP can still purchase shares of mining companies and mines here and there, little by little. Secondly, China has invested a lot in Canada's real estate. According to a study by the National Bank of Canada in 2015, around one-third of Vancouver's real estate was owned by Chinese buyers. Chinese buyers also owned 14% of Toronto's real estate. After looking at that, I wonder what the numbers look like today, since big investment firms like BlackRock are buying real estate intensely around the world, and I'm sure that the Chinese are doing the same. Yet again, after getting pressure from the public and the opposition for the high housing market all over Canada, the Trudeau government is trying to limit foreign investors from buying real estate in the hot markets in Canada. However, it's a little too late in my opinion, since they've been able to do so for years. Thirdly, China has also tried investing in critical infrastructure projects in Canada such as the 5G network. Since 2018, the Chinese tech giant Huawei was expected to build most of the 5G network all over Canada. However, it took years for the Trudeau government to ban Huawei and ZTE, another Chinese firm, from the network amid pressure from the public, opposition parties, and US intelligence. Still, those companies had years to infiltrate the Canadian telecommunication network, and they still have until 2024 to remove their equipment from the network. Am I the only one who thinks we've already been compromised by them, especially with those tech giants' suspicious and past antiques? Also, let's not forget that many popular Chinese applications are still allowed in Canada, such as TikTok, which reportedly collects data from its users and brainwashes kids and, let's say, the older youth. Finally, the Trudeau government has made several shady and alarming deals with China in different sectors that can raise some eyebrows. Let's go rapidly over two. First, there is the RCMP equipment contract awarded to a company with ties to the Chinese government. According to a CBC investigation, the PSPC awarded Sinclair Technologies a contract worth more than $500,000 in 2021. The problem is that Sinclair parent company Norsat International has been owned by the Chinese telecommunications firm Terra since 2017. The Trudeau government said that they were reviewing the contract in 2022. Second, the Canadian Armed Forces have had dealings with China's People's Liberation Army. Since 2019, Rebel News has investigated the matter. According to secret military documents that were grayed out instead of blacked out, on top of admissions from government officials, the Trudeau government invited the PLA to send its troops for cold weather training at the military base in Petawawa, Ontario. The CAF quickly cancelled the training sessions after being exposed, despite Trudeau's displeasure. Still, a Trudeau spokesperson admitted soon after that a PLA delegation visited Canada in February 2018 for winter training. With all that being said, it is troubling to know that the Canadian military has trained China's army in the past and that Canadian federal police forces are having dealings with Chinese businesses. Also, let's not forget that more and more reports are showing that China is reportedly meddling in Canadian elections and buying up politicians, with the Handong case, for example.
Office or any Liberal Party staff ever warned before or after September 2019 election about CSIS concerns that Mr. Han Dong was suspected to be involved in the People's Republic of China foreign interference? And if the Liberal Party government was warned prior to the 2021 election, why did the Liberal Party allow him to run?
Let me start by being very, very clear. There are 1.7 million Canadians who proudly trace their origins back to China. Those Canadians should always be welcomed as full Canadians and encouraged to stand for office, to get involved in their communities, and to take on part of the leadership of this country. That's one of the great things about this country. Let me say that we are extraordinarily lucky and happy to have a member of parliament like Han Dong in our midst, serving his community, serving our country alongside Chinese Canadian MPs from different parts of the country, alongside an extraordinary diverse group of MPs who are proud Canadians even as they trace their origins elsewhere around the world. And that is as it should be. It's also very important to highlight that we have national security intelligence agencies who are there to protect all Canadians of all different origins, as well as our democratic processes. And we always engage with them and listen to them. But let me also be very clear to a really important point that I think some folks are choosing to overlook. In a free democracy, it is not up to unelected security officials to dictate to political parties who can or cannot run. That's a really important principle. We, of course, draw on the expertise every step of the way. But the suggestions we've seen in the media that CSIS would somehow say, no, this person can't run or that person can't run, is not just false. It's actually damaging to people's confidence in our democratic and political institutions.
Therefore, everything seems more apparent now regarding why the Trudeau government has let the Chinese spy balloon fly over Canada's territory and kept Canadians in the dark about it. That said, I think we need to investigate this event and Canada's relationship with China. However, there's more to it. The Trudeau family has also had a long personal relationship with China. So let's explore this suspicious relationship in more detail. During his 2 mandates as the Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau, Justin's father, not this one, but this one, did a lot to establish and develop a deep relationship between Canada and Communist China. One of his most prioritized foreign policy objectives as a Prime Minister was to establish and normalize diplomatic relations between the two nations and help China integrate the international world order. In fact, Pierre Trudeau was one of the first politicians to recognize the People's Republic of China in 1970 at the expense of Taiwan, which helped the PRC to join the United Nations and get recognized by other Western nations as the actual government of China. This initiative led to a few decades of long friendship between Canada and China. Since 2015, Justin Trudeau has revitalized this friendly relationship with China despite the ups and the downs with, for example, the Meng Wanzhou saga, the capture of the two Michaels, and a few other hot moments during which Justin mostly capitulated to China's pressure. Therefore, Justin was not the first Trudeau to have an admiration for China's basic dictatorship. His father was also a big fan of the communists ruling China.
Even with Sun TV watching for any slip, he was asked which country he most admired and referred to China.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China. Because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say, we need to go green as fast as we need to start investing in solar. I mean, there is a flexibility that I know Stephen Harper must dream about, of having a dictatorship that he could do everything he wanted, that I find quite interesting.
Pierre Trudeau even wrote a book about his adventures with his buddy after they traveled to Communist China in 1960, where they met Mao Zedong and other personalities linked to the Communists. This book is perceived by many as a communist propaganda travelogue because it depicts two young travelers discovering the glories of communism in China and praising Mao Zedong's and acolytes' violent takeover and ruling of Communist China. Therefore, we can now start comprehending why the Trudeaus never really opposed the CCP. However, this does not end there. There is more to it. According to the bestseller Red-Handed, How American Elites Get Rich Helping China Win, Pierre Trudeau had a much closer and personal relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. This book, written by the president of the Government Accountability Institute, Peter Schweitzer, documents the financial and political ties between the Chinese government and the powerful individuals that rule us in the West. In fact, it revealed the deep relationship the Trudeaus have had for decades with China. In his book, Schweitzer details how Pierre Trudeau benefited from the support of the wealthy businessman Paul Desmarais, which was the head of the Power Corporation that specialized in building business ties to China. In 1978, the Power Corporation formed the Canada-China Business Council with Prime Minister Trudeau's support, Schweitzer writes, noting that this organization was a key tool used by the CCP to grow ties to Canadian officials to China's benefit. He also writes, Trudeau and Desmarais guided Canada's relationship with Beijing, with Trudeau as a prime minister pushing closer relations with the regime, while Desmarais cashed in on significant deals with Beijing's elite. When Trudeau retired from politics, he went to work at Power Corporation, further nurturing those deals and becoming wealthy in the process. That said, the Trudeau elder was using his power and influence as the prime minister to help Desmarais get rich with the Chinese government and was getting financial retributions from it by them, like the other crooks in government often do. Then he got a guaranteed position, like it often happens, and worked consulting Canadian companies on how to get rich in China enriching the CCP in the process. So there you have it. Do you understand now why Justin is so reluctant to oppose China? Now we know why. Justin followed in his father's footsteps regarding China. Justin and his brother Alexandre have had similar suspicious deals involving China. We just need to look no further than the fact that Justin attended a fundraiser at a Chinese Canadian millionaire's mansion shortly before businessman Zhang Bing donated 1 million Canadian dollars to the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation in 2016, according to the Globe and Mail. Perhaps this is why foreign donations to the Pierre Trudeau Foundation exploded since he was elected Liberal leader back in 2013. Additionally, we can also see Alexandre Trudeau making banks by publishing pro-CCP books in China since his brother took power in 2016. In the end, what should we take away from all of this? Well, we'll probably never get the truth about this incident from the Trudeau government, but we are at least now aware that China has a hold on the Canadian government and the Prime Minister himself. This is most likely why Trudeau gets scolded by Chinese officials so often with little to no pushback.
Everything we discuss is then leaked to the paper. That's not appropriate.
而且我们也不是那样进行的。
And that's not how the conversation was conducted. If there is sincerity on your part,
free and open and frank dialogue, and that is what we will continue to have. We will continue to look to work constructively together, but there will be things we will disagree on, and we will have to continue.
创造条件，创造条件。
Let's create the conditions first.
好。
Also, corruption aside, the Trudeau government was maybe too incompetent to shoot down the Chinese spy balloon that flew over Canada for an entire day. That's a strong possibility. However, can this government at least warn the population and avoid China in the future instead of keeping secrets and trying to save face? That's not too much to ask, isn't it?